One of the beautiful things about being a PC gamer is that when it comes to building a PC, you can pretty much build whatever you want. And yes, those forum mobs out there are going to be chasing around and criticizing regardless of whatever you build, but that's okay because nothing is still stopping you. Now and again, I like to put a build together just to see what I can actually do. It doesn't always have to be the best. And in today's video, we are going to be building a system that is not going to be the fastest, and it's also not going to be the cheapest. I'm just going to be scrabbling together some of the things that I found in the studio to build a machine that is not only beautiful, but still capable of gaming. Now in a recent video, we actually took a look at the Antec Performance 1 FT case, and I always said that I wanted to do a build in it, so I scrabbled around the studio to find parts, and this is kind of a bit of a pile, a dusty pile of parts that I managed to find, and I'm going to build a system out of it. At the core of this system, we are going to be sticking with the AM4 platform. It is a well-tested and versatile platform that will pretty much work with many different CPUs, and this is the motherboard that I found in stock. This is a very basic Rogue Strix B450F. They're not the best motherboards out there. They were also never the most expensive. They're actually pretty cheap and you can pick them up for about £100 at one point. They are generally pretty decent boards, pretty stable with any CPU. And to be honest, this is probably the only remaining Asus board that I've actually got in the studio. Everything else has died. This one has managed to survive, so it's going to be put into the build today. Now, of course, being an AM4 platform, we need an AM4 CPU. And when I dug through some parts, I actually decided to use this. This is an AMD Ryzen 5 3600. Yes, it is a little bit old now and it is starting to fall behind, but it is a more than capable CPU, particularly with the rest of the parts that we're going to be using. To go with our 3000 series 6-core 12-thread processor, we're going to be using this Trident Z RAM. We've actually got 4 sticks of this. It is 3200 megahertz and it is going to total around 32 gigabytes. That's actually a pretty decent amount now for any gaming PC. In actual fact, this machine wouldn't even need that much, but remember, we are building something that looks beautiful and I like to fill up all of those DIMM slots. To go with the theme of this build, which is an AMD with a ROG Strix board, we're going to be going with this graphics card. This is one that I purchased not so long ago and it is actually pretty decent. It is the AMD Radeon RX 6700 XT. It probably is a little bit much for that CPU, but I think we're going to be fine. I think they're going to pair off fine and I'm sure we will know in the testing. The storage in this build, we're just going to go with whatever is actually attached to the board. I do believe it is a Western Digital Black 500 gigabyte NVMe. That's actually already strapped to the board. It's always been on the board ever since I actually built it. So we're going to stick with that and we're going to see what kind of games we can kind of fit on it and get playing. To go with all of this, we are going for a bit of an Antec theme here. We're going to be using as a cooler the Antec Vortex 360. It is a pretty decent cooler. We recently did a video on it. It performs exceptionally well. Go check that out. I'm sure we'll link it at the top if you want to. And then of course we need a power supply. For the power supply, Antec have kindly provided this one here. This is the Antec NeoEco 80 Plus Gold 850 watt fully modular power supply. I haven't used an Antec power supply in years, but I do believe they are pretty good. So I'm going to expect some good things from this one. Then of course we do have the case. It's going to be the Antec Performance 1 FT. It is a little bit large for me to be lifting onto the desk here, but I'm sure you guys will see it when we actually get the build done. It is a very nice looking case. I find it very nice looking. I know a few of you out there don't actually like the look of it because I have seen your comments on our previous video where we took a look at it. Everyone has their own preferences and it's just a case that I like. So now that we have all of the parts together, I suppose we need to actually build the system. Okay, so we managed to get the system built now and it looks pretty good. All of the RGB lighting is working, even though we did have a few issues with it. We needed to actually install the Asus Armory Crate software and then everything got resolved. But we did manage to find that this motherboard is obviously a used one. It's from the studio and I'm pretty sure it came out of our old editing rig because there is an operating system already on it. So pretty much everything was already set up. The system works perfectly fine. Everything is found. It's staying pretty cool and pretty quiet at the moment. I did do a little bit of work on the fan profiles, but apart from that, I think it looks pretty good. The Antec Performance 1 FT has no problem fitting in the ROG Strix RX 6700 XT, but to be honest, it does have a little bit of a name for itself for being the RTX 4090 Eater, so of course we're going to have no issues there. I was thinking of actually vertically mounting the graphics card, but I thought I'd actually put it in like this, just because then I thought we could see the nice RGB lighting on the side. It does have a little bit of a GPU sag, but nothing to actually worry about. You could just put a little bracket in there and lift it up, but it is actually in there quite well, and it's not going anywhere. But of course now we want to see how well this system games, and that's because we are using a reasonably old CPU now with a last generation graphics card, but I'm kind of expecting some pretty decent results. The first game that we're going to test on this is one of our favorites, and we generally test a lot of things with it. It should be able to perform exceptionally well in it, and of course that game is going to be Doom Eternal. Now I do love to play Doom Eternal now and again. It is a pretty decent game and it runs beautifully on most things, and as we can see at the moment we're currently getting an average of 193, 192 frames per second, but we'll drop into the settings and we'll see what we're actually running at. If we pop over to the video settings, we can see that we're running at a very weird resolution of 3200 by 1800. Let's change that. We're going to actually put it down to 1440p. This system should be able to cope with that quite well. And when it comes to presets, we're currently running in a high. We're going to bump that up and we're going to put it onto ultra and just see how well it performs. Dropping back into the game, we can see that our FPS hasn't really dropped that much. We're currently running at 189, 190 frames per second, so it didn't really change that much, but we'll get into a bit of action in the game. This game does generally run well on most hardware and you're not really going to find much of a problem with it, but for the sake of testing and just making sure things work really well, I thought we would just give it a bit of a go. And of course, it is running beautifully fine. I reckon you could actually play this in 4K, and maybe we should actually just test that. Dropping back into the menu, we can see that we are running in 1440p. Let's bump that up a bit. We'll go all the way up to the native resolution of 4K. Let's double check that we're still running in ultra. So yes, we are still running in ultra and we're going to leave it at that. Let's apply those settings, see what happens. So we're now running in 4K and we'll see what effect that currently has. So we are now getting around an average of 92, 93 frames per second. That does mean that the game is still more than playable, and in 4K this game looks absolutely stunning. We've got absolutely no problem playing it. We're getting a slight dip here and there, and we have a 1% low of around 61. Again, still more than playable. So of course this system can play this game perfectly fine. Most people with this kind of system will be running in 1440p anyway. And you can clearly see you can pretty much get near enough 200 frames per second and you don't need any more than that. But let's drop this out and try something a little bit more demanding. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a big fan of the Asus product range. I do find that they have quite high failure rates recently and I don't really tend to buy them. And to be honest, this graphics card can get a little bit loud. It makes all sorts of noises, particularly in coil whine. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but if you can, that's exactly what it is. But the next game that we're going to test is a little bit more demanding than Doom Eternal, and that is Back 4 Blood, another favorite that I love to play. And I also do love to test kind of graphics cards on it now and again, because it does kind of run reasonably well if you lower the settings. If you actually bump them all the way up, graphics cards do tend to struggle, but it's really nice to see what kind of FPS this system can kind of get. Now, in the game, everything does look beautiful like it normally does. This game looks very stunning when you actually bump things up, and I'm thinking that it is actually bumped up a little bit. We'll jump over to the settings and we'll see what we're actually configured to. We'll pop into the graphics here. So we are running in a 1440p resolution. It's kind of synced itself to the monitor, or at least the capture, and we have a quality setting of high. Everything else is turned up. We've got no VSync, no limitation on the FPS. So what we see is what we get. If we just get out of this room and then we'll get into some action and we'll see kind of like what happens when we actually get a bit of more demanding things on the screen. I do love playing this game. I'm a big zombie game fan, and this was brilliant. It was kind of like a really up-to-date version of Left 4 Dead, which I do still play now and again, but of course you don't need an RX 6700 XT to play Left 4 Dead. You can pretty much play one on a GT 710. As we continue on through the game, we can see that we're getting an average of 138 frames per second with a 1% low of 90. This is actually performing exceptionally well, and I think anybody could be pretty impressed with the kind of quality and performance that we're getting here. You could play this game all the way through. We've got a 1% low of 75, so we're above that magic 60 that we always try to aim for, and I'm pretty sure you could probably play this in 4K, but we're not going to bother testing that. We're happy with 1440p, and we're happy with the performance of this machine, particularly with that older generation Ryzen processor. Now, those two games are two games that I actually do love to play, so this kind of system would suit me perfectly fine, particularly when I can run them in 1440p and still get over that magical 60 FPS. But there are games out there that are currently being released where a system like this would actually struggle, and we're going to test one of them out, and we're going to go all the way to the tippity top of the one that's pretty much destroying all systems at the moment. And of course, that game is Alan Wake 2. Now, this game is extremely demanding, and it completely totaled a GTX 1080 Ti the other day that we were testing. And I kind of said that I wouldn't actually add it to our benchmarking suite, but now and again, I would like to actually pit it against some of the graphics cards that we got just to see how well things perform. We are currently running, if we just pop over to the options, in a 1080p. I'm not going to push it any further than that. This game is really demanding, and we have a custom setting here of high. If I just actually set that to a quality preset of high, it will change a few things over, and maybe we can get a little bit more performance out of it. But let's drop back into the game and see where we are. We reset our stats. We can see that we're currently getting an average of 49 frames per second, 50 frames per second with a 1% low of 41. That's actually not too bad. I'm really impressed with this considering the performance we got from the GTX card. But let's run into the woods and see what happens when we get to a bit more of a demanding view. I have been told that the forest scene in this game is one of the most demanding, so hopefully if it actually performs reasonably well here, it's going to perform reasonably well throughout the rest of the game. I would actually consider this so far as a playable game. It looks pretty good. I wouldn't say that even on a high quality preset, it's completely next gen kind of graphics. I'm actually quite impressed with the way that this machine is behaving in this game. Maybe there's been a new update on the game recently that's improved things. I'm not quite sure. I'm not really following it. But I think you could actually play this through. It's reasonably fine, and this kind of system is going to get you there. Now, if you were to actually go out and build a system just like this, you're going to be spending around £900 to £1,000. Is that actually worth it for when you're getting a slightly older generation Ryzen processor on an older generation platform, and of course a last generation graphics card? Probably not. You can actually build stuff for roughly the same kind of price on the later gens, particularly if you look at the Intel side. But I like to build things, and this is a system that I like to put together just to see what it can do. And clearly you can still game on all of these components. This system will most likely get torn down now and probably put back in its boxes, but I am going to reuse pretty much the shell of it. We are going to be moving our benching system into this case with the cooler. So it's going to give us plenty of space to be able to test lots more GPUs going forward. You won't want to miss that, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I'm sure as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.